So, my parents used to be big outdoor buffs. My father is an ex-champion hobby boat racer, and my mom was an Alabama-raised country girl. So they always wanted to go camping or sailing and fishing when I was little. They went on a trip with some friends of theirs when I was about 10, which was 16 years ago, and since then, they refused to go camping anymore. Ever. My dad told me the story sometime after I had turned 18, and it still makes me wonder, considering the following. My parents moved around a lot and only had one set of friends that they really kept in touch with at all times, Danny and Lisa. Danny and Lisa weren't outdoor nuts like my parents were, but they were friends, and it's fun to camp with your friends, right? So they all planned a 5-day trip to a lake south of where we lived with a creek on it that was on Danny's father's property. The plan was to camp on the property, fish all they wanted, and then go to the lake with ease. The following is now from my father's account of what happened. He told me this once, and only once, and got drunk after he told me, which is extremely uncharacteristic of him to do. The first 2 days were normal, just camping, drinking, sharing stories while fishing and boating, and water skiing heaven. It was just young adults and parents having fun. The second night, for the entire night, everyone kept hearing weird yelps and barks, as though two dogs were in a fight, but both were just hurt and yelping the whole time. They figured it was just coyotes and went to sleep. The next day, they continued on their adventures, but that night, they kept hearing those noises, but this time, they were extremely close to the camp. So my father and Danny went out to go see if they could scare them off, while my mother and Lisa stayed behind, scared out of their minds and hiding in a tent, probably reading the Bible or something. Anyways, my dad and Danny went out to go look for these fighting coyotes and searched for them by following the sound. My dad brought a shotgun, and Danny was carrying a machete. They were hoping to scare the coyotes, or whatever they were, with a gunshot. They got to a clearing and could hear the noise, now extremely loud, but it seemed to be from multiple directions, as if the sounds were distant from each other. Now, my dad is a bit of a kook and swears he saw Bigfoot at 14, but this was different. He told Danny to go back. No questions, no explanation. Just, Danny, we need to go back. So they did. But the sounds didn't fade away this time. Whatever they were now following my dad and Danny. Danny nervously asked my dad what was going on, but my dad wouldn't tell him. Whenever Danny would ask, my dad would just keep shushing him. Now, Danny is a bit of a goofball, hence why I always liked my Uncle Danny, so he thought my dad was getting him back for a prank. He kept nudging my dad and trying to get him to say, "Gotcha," but my dad never untensed. Finally, they get close to the creek, a ways up from the camp, and my dad tells Danny to run, fast. Then my dad took off with no remorse. Danny apparently followed but tripped and called for my dad, but my dad, who tears up and sputters at this part, also uncharacteristic of him, refused to go back for him. Danny began calling for help and yelled that his leg was broken, that it hurt, etc.
Steve, come back, please.
But my dad just kept running. Then my dad, my mom, and Lisa all say they heard what sounded like a very loud cougar growl. Imagine two lionesses going at it, amplified by 70. That's how loud they said it was. It apparently made my dad's ears ring. After that, Danny stopped screaming for help. My dad got back to the camp, and the ladies asked what the fuck was going on, but my dad just said that something was out there. My mom, being the practical woman she is, says, "Well, no shit, what was it that was out there?" My dad wouldn't answer. Lisa is now freaking out and asking where Danny is, but my father just keeps saying he'll be back here in a second. A few hours pass by, and the ladies are now extremely worried about Danny. Finally, from the opposite side that my dad had arrived from, came Danny, walking just fine up to the camp without a word. My dad cocked his rifle, but said it was for survival readiness, something my mom said she won't forget because that's what tipped her off that something was very wrong. Danny first walked up and nudged his way next to my mother, But after the weird looks and the death glare from my father moved closer to Lisa, who had been nagging him for about 10 minutes. But he would only reply with a grunt of yes or no, and just stare into the fire. My dad finally asked Danny what happened to his leg, and Danny looked up, confused. My dad told him, "I thought you said it was broken." Danny looked at him and replied, "Broken," and then, as if on cue, began yelling, "Steve, oh, my leg, I think it's broken." The ladies grabbed medkits and first aid and water, and were rationalizing Danny's bizarre behavior as him going into shock. But upon getting his pants off with much difficulty, as he had refused to help them and made it harder for them to remove them, they saw no obvious break in the bone and no blood. All they found were bruises all up and down his side. Lisa kept asking him what happened, but he would only grunt and wave her hands away from the bruises. My dad said, "He's fine, let's just go to bed." My mom gave him the "are you fucking kidding me" look, and he gave her the "do it woman" look. My mom complied, as he never does that, and they went to their tent. They say they heard Lisa nagging and one-sided arguing with Danny, because he would never reply when she would ask him any questions. Eventually, she gets fed up and says that she's going to go outside to go pee. Danny asks if he can go with her since there were animals out there, in not so many words. She said okay, and they left together. My dad woke up at around 10 in the morning and began making breakfast. Danny and Lisa were gone. My mom asked where they were, but my dad wouldn't reply. After a little while, they both came back, rather unceremoniously and without a word. They weren't holding hands or in each other's arms or arm over the shoulder or anything like they always were, just kind of awkwardly standing next to each other. They refused food, and Danny would randomly yell out about his injured leg, and Lisa kept complaining of feeling ill. My mom suggested they go home and call off the trip on account of Danny's injured leg, who, to my mom's horrified recollection, had not been limping at all. Danny and Lisa nodded in agreement, and my father just kind of watched. Danny and Lisa got into my parents' car and not their own, and just waited. They didn't pack up their tents, their food, their coolers, their bags, or anything. My mom came over and asked if they were going to grab their things, and they shook their heads. My dad asked, "Why don't you take your car?" And they both said, "Broken," just like Danny had last night in a creepy, practiced way. My dad sighed and packed up the car, and they drove off. Danny and Lisa stayed quiet the whole way, except for their random mumblings to each other, which were completely indecipherable to my parents. My parents took them home and then came and got me, and I could tell that something was wrong besides them coming back days early. They told me that Danny had gotten hurt, which is why they had called off the trip. I asked if I could go see them, but my dad replied, "No," a little too quickly, and so I thought he was mad at me, and I left to go play PlayStation. Later on, I snuck back up the stairs and listened from the stairwell. I overheard my parents and grandparents talking about how something wasn't right, how it was like those old stories, yada yada yada. I assumed they were talking about something random and got bored and went to go play more PlayStation. A few weeks later, I asked about my Uncle Danny, and my dad said that we were not going to go see them anymore. I was mad, and so I demanded to know why. He told me something about his dad being sick, and so I became sad. Then I forgot about it, and life went on. Fast forward about 5 years, and I'm at the supermarket where I used to live when all this happened. It was also near where Danny and Lisa lived, only on the other side of the road. Being 10 years old, I was never allowed to go over, but now that I can drive, I decided to go see the old house, check out Danny and Lisa's house, and see the old neighborhood. I'm driving slowly and rather creepishly down my old street when I spot Danny walking down the road. I get excited and I flag him down, pull over, and get out of my car to talk to him. He seemed stiff to me, kind of robotic, I guess you could say. When he hugged me, it felt way too tight and like he was trying to smother me. I asked him how he'd been, and he just said, "All right." I asked him where Lisa was, and he just said at home. I asked if I could see her, and he agreed. I walked with him and asked him about all kinds of people and tried to catch up, but he either didn't remember or didn't care about 90% of it, which to me seemed odd because Danny was always very involved in the community. I decided to ask him a couple of obvious trick questions and he failed, miserably, and then I became a bit nervous. We get to his door and he opens it, and the smell of a goddamn meat locker just pours out. It's a horrid, incomprehensible smell just assaulting my nostrils. The place is a wreck. Shit is just everywhere. Everything is coated in dust and shit, and nothing looks clean. Laundry is everywhere, no lights are really on, it's a mess. I'm more than a little freaked out now, and I ask, what happened here? And he just grunted, with a really weird, almost guttural grunt. So I ask where Lisa is, and she yells from the kitchen, "In here," which was just behind a wall facing the room that I was in, and from which I could hear and smell something cooking. I walked into the kitchen expecting to see Lisa making some normal food, and was planning on asking her why Danny was acting weird. But when I got there, what I saw was unforgettable. She's standing in the kitchen, butt-ass naked, covered in blood, and cooking some kind of mangled mess, surrounded by thousands of bones. I was just smart enough to notice a pile of fucking pet collars in the corner. I yelled and Danny lunged at me. I kind of sidestepped away from him clumsily and ran out the door. Danny gave chase and I got to my car and noped the fuck out as fast as my little blazer could go. I got home, called the police, gave them the address, and went straight to my dad. He punched me in the face and told me he overheard the address. I tried to apologize and he yelled at me, so I yelled at him back for lying to me for so long. His response was to hit me again and then hug me and say he was sorry. I tried to ask him for more information, but he rather strongly told me to shut the fuck up and forget about it. The police came to my house and told me they didn't find anyone living there, but that my story had matched the description of the place and it was a fucking nightmare. They told me they suspected the previous owners had left and a mixture of wild animals and burglaring homeless people had been living there. My dad, being the fucking ridiculous genius that he is, asked why the house hadn't been foreclosed on or why bill payments hadn't been an issue. The cop stammered and then said they'd look into it. Apparently, Danny's father had been paying for it all, as per some agreement when they got married. I still haven't seen Danny or Lisa since then, and my dad only once told me the full story. My meeting up with them was just pure coincidence, and only made the story worse. A couple years after all this happened, my dad told me the story finally, but when he did, he got drunk, and in his drunken stupor that night, told me he knew exactly what happened to Danny, and he knew what they were, but that it was better Danny than him.